Captain Jake Morrison stood at the big window of his ship and looked out at another empty star system. The UES Frontier moved slowly past dead planets that had never known life. Jake had been doing this job for 15 years, and every system was the same. Rocks and gas and silence. Nothing moved except his ship and the cold wind of space. 300 years had passed since humans first left Earth. They built ships that could travel faster than light and went looking for friends among the stars. What they found was nothing. Empty worlds, dead moons, and the terrible quiet of a universe that seemed to hold only them. Jake walked to the science deck where Dr. Lisa Hayes was studying pictures of ruins they had found on the last planet. Lisa was young but smart, and she never gave up hope that they would find something important. She looked up when Jake came in, and her face was excited. The ruins were very old, maybe millions of years old. Someone had built great cities on that world long ago, but now only broken stones remained. Lisa showed Jake pictures of strange writing carved into walls and metal objects that made no sense. The builders had been smart, maybe smarter than humans, but they were gone now. Jake asked Lisa what she thought had happened to them. Lisa pointed to marks on the stones that looked like they had been melted or burned. Someone had destroyed these cities on purpose, not war or accident, but careful destruction, like someone wanted to erase every trace of who had lived there. Back on Earth, Admiral Kevin Brooks sat in his office and looked at reports from 100 exploration ships. Every ship found the same thing: old ruins, dead worlds, and emptiness. The human colonies were growing larger every year, but they were still alone in the galaxy. Brooks had started to wonder if humans were cursed to wander forever without finding anyone else. The colonies needed supplies and protection. Earth built more ships and sent more people to live on distant worlds. They built cities under domes and grew food in special buildings. Children were born who had never seen Earth, but they all learned about the great loneliness. Humans were good at many things, but they had no one to share their achievements with. Amy Carter was 25 years old and worked at a listening post on the edge of human space. Her job was to watch for signals from other intelligent beings. For 3 years, she had heard nothing but the natural sounds of stars and planets. Space made many noises, but none of them came from thinking creatures. Amy worked the night shift because she liked the quiet. Earth was so far away that radio signals took months to reach her station. She felt like she was sitting at the edge of everything, listening for voices that never came. Her equipment was the best that humans could build, and it could hear whispers from across the galaxy. On Tuesday night, something changed. Amy was drinking coffee and reading when her machines started making new sounds. At first, she thought it was just another star being born or dying. Space was full of violence and noise from natural events, but this sound was different. It had a pattern. Amy played the signal over and over. It was not random like the sounds that stars make. Someone or something had made this signal on purpose. It came from beyond the farthest human colonies, from a place where no human ship had ever gone. The signal was weak but clear, and it seemed to be calling. Amy called her supervisor, who called Earth, who called Admiral Brooks. Within hours, every listening post in human space was pointed toward the signal. Scientists argued about what it might mean, but Amy knew in her heart that they had finally found proof they were not alone. The signal came in bursts, like someone tapping out a message. Human computers tried to find meaning in the pattern, but it was unlike any human language. Whatever was sending it was alien, but it was definitely intelligent. After 300 years of silence, someone was trying to talk to them. Jake got orders to take his ship toward the signal source. It would be a long journey to the edge of known space, but his crew was excited. Dr. Lisa Hayes packed her equipment and prepared to study the first evidence of living aliens that humans had ever found. Admiral Brooks called a meeting of Earth's leaders. The signal might be friendly or it might be dangerous, but it was the most important discovery in human history. They decided to send ships, but to be careful. Humans had weapons, but they did not know what they might be facing. Amy kept listening to the signal as ships prepared for the journey. She noticed that it was getting stronger, like whatever was sending it was moving closer to human space. The pattern never changed, but the power behind it was growing. Something was coming toward them through the dark between the stars, and Amy wondered if humans were ready to meet their first alien neighbors. The signal led them to a place that should not exist. Commander Ryan Torres looked through his helmet at a massive structure spinning slowly around a neutron star. The station was huge, bigger than any human city, and it was very old. Metal that humans had never seen reflected the deadly light from the star below. Ryan led his team through an airlock that opened when they approached. The air inside was breathable and gravity felt normal. Lights came on as they walked through corridors that stretched for miles. Someone had built this place to last forever, and it was still working after countless years. Dr. Maya Patel followed Ryan with her translation equipment. Maya spoke 12 human languages and had studied every form of writing that humans had ever created, but the symbols on the walls were completely alien. They seemed to move in her vision like they were alive. The team found a central chamber, filled with floating screens of light. When Maya touched one, images began to play. She saw creatures that looked nothing like humans building great cities among the stars. The images showed different aliens on different worlds, but they all seemed happy and proud of what they had built. Ryan watched over Maya's shoulder as she worked to understand the alien records. The station was a library, a place where many different species had stored their histories. There were millions of records from civilizations that had risen and flourished across the galaxy. But as Maya dug deeper into the files, her excitement turned to horror. Every civilization in the records had the same ending. They would grow and learn and build wonderful things. Then suddenly all their records would stop. No explanation, no warning, just silence. Maya found references to something the aliens called the silence. Different species had different names for it, but they all described the same thing. Entire worlds would simply disappear from contact. Ships sent to investigate would find empty planets with no sign that anyone had ever lived there. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Adams was exploring the station's outer sections when he found the weapons. They were unlike any human weapon, designed to fight something that normal guns could not hurt. Ben was a soldier and he knew defensive systems when he saw them. Someone had been preparing for war. The alien records spoke of an enemy that could not be fought with normal methods. They called them the Devourers, beings that fed on something more precious than flesh or blood. They consumed memory itself, erasing not just life but the very idea that life had existed. Ryan gathered his team to share what they had learned. The galaxy was not empty by accident. Something had been hunting intelligent life for millions of years, wiping out each civilization, so completely that no trace remained. The ancient station was hidden near the neutron star to protect it from discovery. Maya continued translating as more horrible truths emerged. The Devourers did not just kill, they removed all evidence that their victims had ever existed. Survivors would forget their own families and histories. Entire species would vanish from memory as if they had never been born. Ben found technical manuals that described weapons designed to fight the Devourers. The aliens had learned that normal matter could not harm these creatures. They had developed new technologies based on consciousness and memory, turning thought itself into a weapon. The team realized that humans had been walking through a graveyard. Every empty world they had found had once been home to thinking beings. The ruins that Dr. Lisa Hayes studied were the few traces that the Devourers had missed in their hunt for complete erasure. Ryan sent urgent messages back to Earth. Admiral Brooks needed to know what they had discovered. The galaxy was not safe, and humans were not alone. They were simply the latest species to grow large enough to attract the attention of an ancient evil. Maya found records of how other species had tried to fight the Devourers. Some had built hidden bases like this station. Others had tried to flee to distant galaxies. None had succeeded completely, but they had left behind warnings and weapons for whoever came after them. The station's computers contained star maps showing where other hidden bases might be found. The ancient aliens had created a network of secret locations, each one holding knowledge and weapons for the final battle against the Devourers. Ben discovered that the station's defenses were still active. Ancient weapons pointed outward into space, waiting for an enemy that had not come. The aliens who built this place had expected to make a last stand here, but they had vanished before the battle could begin. As the team prepared to return to their ship, Maya made one final discovery. Deep in the station's memory core was a message left by the last survivors. They had seen the Devourers coming and knew they could not escape. Their final act was to hide this knowledge for the next intelligent species to find. Ryan looked back at the station as his ship moved away. The ancient library continued its lonely orbit around the neutron star, keeping its secrets safe in the darkness. But now humans knew the truth about their solitude. They were not the first to reach for the stars, and they would not be the last, to face the hunger that waited in the void. The message was clear in every alien record. The Devourers were coming, and they had never failed to find their prey. But the ancient aliens had also left behind the tools to fight them. The war for the galaxy's memory was about to begin. The attack came without warning on New Haven, a peaceful farming colony at the edge of human space. Captain Morgan Freeman was drinking coffee in his quarters when the emergency alarm started screaming. The UES Defiance was the closest military, shipped to the colony, and Morgan ordered his crew to battle stations immediately. When they arrived at New Haven, Morgan saw something that made no sense. The colony was there, but it was wrong somehow. Buildings stood empty, and machines ran without operators. Crops grew in fields, but no one tended them. The 10,000 colonists had simply vanished. Morgan sent landing parties to investigate, but they found nothing. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no clues about what had happened. The colonists' personal belongings were still in their homes. Food was still cooking in kitchens. It was like everyone had just stopped existing in the middle of their daily lives. Dr. Sam Rodriguez was studying the alien records on Earth when the reports from New Haven arrived. Sam had been working day and night to understand the ancient warnings about the Devourers. What happened at New Haven matched perfectly with the alien descriptions of how the enemy attacked. The Devourers were not aliens in any normal sense. They were beings of pure energy that existed between dimensions. They fed on consciousness itself, draining the life force from thinking creatures. But their hunger went deeper than just killing. They consumed memory and history, erasing all trace that their victims had ever lived. Morgan questioned his own crew about New Haven, but something strange was happening. His officers could not remember why they had come to the colony. When Morgan showed them reports about the missing colonists, they looked confused. The paperwork mentioned 10,000 people, but his crew insisted the colony had always been empty. Sam realized that the Devourers did not just erase their victims. They changed reality itself so that no one would remember the lost. The missing colonists of New Haven were being forgotten by everyone who had known them. Soon, it would be as if they had never existed at all. Engineer Grace Kelly was working frantically in the captured alien station to understand their memory protection technology. Grace was one of the best engineers in human space, but the alien technology was far beyond anything humans had built. She needed to learn how to protect human minds from the Devourer's erasure effect. The ancient aliens had discovered that consciousness could be shielded using quantum fields generated by special crystals. These memory cores could preserve thoughts and experiences even when the Devourers tried to erase them. But the technology was complex, and humans had never worked with anything like it. Morgan felt his own memories beginning to fade. He tried to write down everything he could remember about New Haven, but the words seemed wrong as soon as he wrote them. His ship's computer showed logs of the colony, but his mind rejected the information as false. The Devourers were eating his. memories from a distance. Grace made a breakthrough when she discovered that human neural patterns were different from the ancient aliens. The memory protection technology needed to be modified to work with human brains. She began building prototype devices that could shield consciousness from the Devourer's influence. More colonies started disappearing across human space. Each time, the pattern was the same. People would vanish without trace, and everyone else would forget they had ever existed. Planets that had been home to millions became empty worlds that official records claimed had never been colonized. Admiral Brooks called an emergency meeting, but half the people he invited could not remember why they were there. Earth's leaders were forgetting entire colonies and military units. The Devourers were systematically erasing human civilization from existence, and most people could not even see it happening. Dr. Sam Rodriguez worked with a team of volunteers who were testing Grace's memory shield devices. The shields worked, but they came with a terrible cost. People wearing them could remember the lost colonies, but they also remembered things that no longer existed. They became living witnesses to the erasure of their own species. Morgan put on one of the prototype shields and suddenly remembered everything. New Haven had been real, with 10,000 people living normal lives. He had friends there, fellow officers who had retired to farm the rich soil. Now they were gone, and only he could remember they had ever lived. The Devourers were coming closer to Earth with each attack. They moved through space in ways that human science could not explain, appearing wherever intelligent life gathered in large numbers. They were drawn to centers of learning and culture like predators following the scent of prey. Grace discovered that the Devourers had been hunting for millions of years, following the same pattern across the galaxy. They would wait until a species grew large and spread across many worlds, then strike everywhere at once. No civilization had ever survived their complete attention. Sam found records showing that Earth itself was being prepared for erasure. The Devourers had scouts watching, human space, invisible beings that reported back to the main swarm. Humanity's rapid expansion had marked them as the next target for complete destruction. Morgan gathered the few people who still wore memory shields and could remember the truth. They were the only humans who knew that their species was under attack by an enemy that most people could not even perceive. The real war had already begun, and humanity was losing badly. The volunteers with memory shields started calling themselves the Memory Guard. They were the only ones who could remember fallen colonies and missing friends. They carried the weight of preserving human history as it was being systematically destroyed. Grace worked on improving the shield technology, but progress was slow. The Devourers seemed to adapt to human countermeasures, finding new ways to erase protected memories. The ancient aliens had fought this same battle for thousands of years before finally losing. Admiral Brooks put on a memory shield and remembered colonies that had been erased from all official records. Entire fleets had vanished along with everyone who might have remembered them. Humanity was being eaten alive, and most people could not see the wounds. The Devourers were patient hunters who had perfected their methods over eons of practice. They knew that fear and panic would only make their prey harder to catch. Instead, they erased quietly and completely, leaving behind a universe that could not remember what it had lost. President Helen Carter stood before the United Earth Assembly wearing a memory shield device. Most of the delegates could not understand why she was talking about colonies that their records showed had never existed. Half of them thought she had gone mad, while the other half wondered if they were the ones losing their minds. Helen explained the terrible truth as gently as she could. Humanity was under attack by an enemy that erased its victims from existence itself. Entire worlds, full of people, had been consumed and forgotten. The war had already begun, but most humans could not see it happening because their memories were being stolen. The delegates who agreed to wear memory shields immediately understood the horror. They remembered friends and family members who had vanished from reality. They recalled voting on colony funding for worlds that no longer existed in any official records. The scope of the erasure was staggering and growing larger every day. Admiral Chris Evans took charge of a massive emergency project to build ships that could resist the Devourer's memory attacks. Human engineers worked with the alien technology that Grace Kelly had been studying. They needed vessels that could preserve human knowledge even if entire planets were forgotten. The new ships were built around massive memory cores that stored everything humans had ever learned. Each vessel became a floating library containing the complete history of human civilization. If Earth itself was erased, these ships would carry humanity's story to distant stars where it might survive. Colonel Kate Miller trained the first units of Memory Guard soldiers. These volunteers wore advanced shield devices that protected their consciousness from alteration. They could fight an enemy that most people could not see and remember, battles that were being erased as they happened. The Memory Guard faced challenges that no military unit had ever encountered. They fought enemies that could make their own allies forget they existed. Wounded soldiers would be forgotten by their medics. Dead heroes would vanish from all records of their sacrifice. Only those with memory shields could maintain unit cohesion. Dr. Nick Johnson made an important discovery while studying the ancient alien archives. Hidden within the historical records were fragments of tactical knowledge from species that had almost defeated the Devourers. These civilizations had developed weapons and strategies specifically designed to fight memory-eating entities. Nick found blueprints for consciousness amplifiers that could turn human thoughts into weapons. The devices worked by focusing the electrical patterns of the brain into directed energy beams. A soldier wearing the right equipment could literally think an enemy to death. The ancient records also contained warnings about the Devourer's true nature. They were not individual creatures, but parts of a vast collective intelligence that spanned dimensions. Killing one Devourer was like cutting off a finger from a giant hand. The real enemy was much larger and more dangerous than humans had realized. Admiral Evans launched the first memory-protected fleet just as more human colonies began disappearing. The ships were designed to work together as a network, sharing information instantly so that losing one vessel would not mean losing its knowledge. Each ship backed up the memories of all the others. Kate's Memory Guard units were deployed to defend key colonies, but they faced an impossible task. The Devourers could attack from directions that did not exist in normal space. They would appear inside buildings, consume everyone present, then vanish back to their hidden dimension. The Memory Guard learned to fight by instinct since their enemies could not be detected by normal senses. Soldiers developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when reality was being altered around them. They fought shadows and echoes, protecting people who could not see the danger. Nick discovered that some ancient species had tried to create memory viruses that could infect the Devourers themselves. The idea was to plant false memories in the enemy collective that would disrupt their ability to function. Several attempts had been made, but none had succeeded completely. The consciousness weapons that Nick studied worked by overloading the Devourer's ability to process memory. A focused human mind could generate patterns of thought that were toxic to memory-eating entities. But using such weapons was dangerous because it required opening the mind completely to attack. Helen met with leaders from across human space to coordinate resistance efforts. Many still could not accept that the threat was real because their protected memories conflicted with their altered perceptions. The meeting was held on one of the memory ships to ensure that participants could remember what was discussed. Admiral Evans realized that humanity needed to go on the offensive before more colonies were lost. The Devourers were methodical hunters who would eventually consume all human civilization if they were not stopped. But attacking an enemy that existed between dimensions required weapons that humans had never imagined. Kate's soldiers began using consciousness weapons in combat with mixed results. The weapons were effective against individual Devourers, but using them left soldiers mentally exhausted and vulnerable. Worse, the enemy seemed to be learning how to defend against the new attacks. Nick found records of an ancient species called the architects who had built secret bases throughout the galaxy. These bases contained weapons designed specifically to fight the Devourers. If humans could find and activate these hidden arsenals, they might have a chance to win the war. The memory guard discovered that Earth itself was under constant surveillance by invisible scouts. The Devourers were studying human civilization and planning their final attack. Every day of delay meant that the enemy learned more about human weaknesses and defensive capabilities. Grace Kelly worked with alien technology to improve the memory shield devices. She realized that the shields could be modified to do more than just protect memories. They could be used to detect Devourer activity and even to track the creatures back to their hidden dimension. Admiral Evans prepared for the greatest military challenge in human history. His memory-protected fleet would have to fight an enemy that could erase them from existence while searching for ancient weapons that might not even exist. The fate of all conscious life in the galaxy depended on their success. The war for memory was entering a new phase where humans would stop running and start fighting back. Captain Alex Turner followed coordinates from the ancient archives to a dead system where 3 planets orbited a dying red star. His ship's sensors detected massive structures buried beneath the surface of the middle planet. Someone had built an entire city underground and hidden it from detection for millions of years. The excavation took weeks, but Alex's team finally broke through into vast chambers filled with crystalline formations. The crystals hummed with energy and seemed to respond to human presence. Dr. Maya Patel recognized the structures from alien records. They were stasis pods designed to preserve living beings for unlimited time. When Maya activated the revival sequence, the crystals began to glow brighter. Slowly, shapes formed within the light as beings that had slept for eons began to wake. The first to emerge were tall creatures made of living crystal who called themselves the Zythans. They had been hiding from the Devourers since their homeworld was consumed. The Zythans spoke through harmonic vibrations that human translators could barely convert to words. They remembered the last great war against the Devourers when dozens of species had united to fight the memory thieves. The alliance had failed, but survivors had hidden in secret bases like this one, waiting for someone to wake them. Alex learned that the Zythans could manipulate energy in ways that humans did not understand. They had developed weapons that could harm the Devourers by turning their own power against them. But their technology required multiple species working together because no single race had all the necessary abilities. Maya used the alien star maps to locate other hidden bases across the galaxy. Each base contained different survivor species who had found ways to hide from the Devourers. Some slept in stasis, while others existed as pure consciousness stored in quantum computers. All had been waiting for someone to unite them again. The second base was hidden inside a gas giant where aquatic beings called the Kalari lived in floating cities. They had survived by existing in a state between life and death that the Devourers could not detect. When humans arrived, the Kalari emerged from their hiding places eager to rejoin the fight. General Matt Stone was put in charge of coordinating what became known as the Memory Alliance. Each awakened species contributed unique abilities to the growing coalition. The Zythans provided energy weapons, the Kalari shared biotechnology, and other races offered knowledge of consciousness manipulation and dimensional travel. The Alliance faced enormous challenges because most species had been hiding for so long that they had lost hope of victory. Many wanted to remain hidden rather than risk exposure to the Devourers. Matt had to convince them that humanity's arrival had changed the situation, and that united, they might finally win. Dr. Julia Roberts led teams of scientists studying captured Devourer technology from battlefield wrecks. The enemy devices were built from materials that existed partially in normal space and partially in other dimensions. Julia realized that the Devourer's greatest strength could become their weakness if properly exploited. The captured technology revealed that Devourers were not truly alive in any normal sense. They were fragments of a vast entity that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each individual Devourer was like a finger of an enormous hand reaching into normal space to feed on consciousness and memory. Julia discovered that consciousness itself generated a form of energy that the Devourers could not resist. They were drawn to thinking beings like moths to flame, but large concentrations of focused thought could actually damage them. The ancient species had learned to weaponize their own minds against the enemy. Matt coordinated training programs where humans and aliens learned to fight together using combined technologies. Human soldiers equipped with Zythan energy weapons and Kalari biotechnology could engage Devourers in direct combat. The Alliance was building an army unlike anything that had existed before. The awakened species shared tactical knowledge from the last war that had been lost millions of years ago. They had learned that the Devourers operated in cycles, sweeping through the galaxy every few million years to clear away any intelligence that had grown too large. Humanity had simply been unlucky enough to mature during a harvest cycle. Alex continued exploring hidden bases and awakening survivor species throughout the galaxy. Each new addition to the Alliance brought different capabilities and knowledge. Some races had mastered time manipulation, while others could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Alliance discovered that the Devourers had a weakness that previous species had never been able to exploit. The collective intelligence that controlled them existed in a specific dimensional frequency that could be disrupted by the right combination of technologies. But accessing that frequency required abilities from multiple races working in perfect coordination. Julia's research teams made breakthrough after breakthrough as they combined human engineering with alien knowledge. They developed new weapons that could strike at Devourers across dimensional barriers. They created armor that could protect consciousness from memory attacks. Most importantly, they learned how to track the enemy back to their hidden realm. General Stone realized that the Alliance had grown strong enough to consider offensive operations against the Devourers. For the first time in millions of years, the forces of consciousness outnumbered the forces of erasure. The survivors were no longer hiding from their hunters, but preparing to become hunters themselves. The awakened species began sharing their most closely guarded secrets with humanity. They revealed the locations of ancient weapon caches and dimensional gateways that could be used to reach the Devourer's home realm. The final battle would have to be fought in a place where normal matter and energy behaved differently. Matt coordinated the largest military buildup in galactic history as the Memory Alliance prepared for total war. Human factories worked alongside alien technology to produce weapons and armor for dozens of different species. The Alliance was becoming a force that could challenge the Devourer's dominion over the galaxy. The enemy seemed to sense that something had changed because Devourer attacks became more frequent and aggressive. They were trying to destroy the Alliance before it could threaten them seriously, but the awakened species had learned from their previous defeat and were ready for the coming storm. The final war began when sensors across the galaxy detected massive disturbances near the galactic core. Admiral Jack Thompson watched from the bridge of his flagship as space itself seemed to tear open. The Devourers were emerging from their hidden dimension in numbers that dwarfed every previous attack. This was not a raid, but a complete harvest of all intelligent life. The Memory Alliance fleet spread across dozens of star systems as thousands of ships took position around ancient weapon platforms. Each vessel carried crews from multiple species, working together with technologies that had never been combined before. Human engineers operated Zythan energy systems, while Kalari biotechnicians managed consciousness amplifiers that could turn thoughts into weapons. Jack coordinated the defense from his command ship, which held representatives from every awakened species. The Alliance had learned that the Devourers could only be fought by minds working in perfect harmony. Individual consciousness was food for the enemy, but unified consciousness became a weapon that could destroy them. The first wave of Devourers appeared as tears in space that leaked darkness into normal reality. They moved without ships or technology, existing as pure hunger that consumed everything in their path. Entire star systems went dark as the creatures fed on the life force of planets and stars alike. Captain Tony Garcia led a squadron of fighters equipped with consciousness bombs designed by Dr. Julia Roberts. These weapons contained compressed awareness patterns that would detonate when exposed to Devourer energy fields. Tony's mission was to penetrate the enemy formation and deliver the bombs to the largest creatures at the center of the swarm. Battle was unlike anything in recorded history because it was fought as much with minds as with weapons. Alliance crews used their combined consciousness to generate protective fields around their ships while focusing their thoughts into beams that could slice through Devourer forms. The enemy retaliated by trying to erase the memories of everyone fighting them. Commander Dana White coordinated ground defenses on key Alliance worlds where memory beacons were being activated. These devices would preserve the knowledge of the battle even if everyone fighting it was consumed. The beacons used quantum storage to maintain records that could not be erased by any known force. The Devourers adapted quickly to Alliance tactics, learning to resist consciousness weapons and memory shields. But the awakened species had prepared for this by developing weapons that evolved during combat. Human creativity combined with alien knowledge created surprises that even the ancient enemy could not predict. Jack realized that conventional tactics would not work against an enemy that could erase defeats from their own memory. The Alliance needed to strike at the source of Devourer power, the collective intelligence that coordinated their attacks across dimensions. This meant sending ships into the enemy's home realm where normal physics did not apply. Tony volunteered to lead the assault on the Devourer stronghold. His ship was equipped with experimental engines that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The journey would be one way because no ship had ever returned from the space between spaces where the enemy originated. The Alliance activated every ancient weapon they had discovered, turning the galaxy into a battlefield that spanned multiple dimensions. Reality itself became unstable as forces that should not exist in the same space clashed with powers that transcended normal matter and energy. Dana watched as colonies across Alliance space came under direct attack by the largest Devourers ever seen. These ancient creatures had consumed entire civilizations and grown to enormous size. They moved between stars like living storms that devoured everything in their path. The memory beacons activated across the galaxy as Alliance forces made their final stand. Each beacon contained the complete history of every species that had ever fought the Devourers. Even if the current battle was lost, future civilizations would have the knowledge needed to continue the war. Tony's assault fleet penetrated the dimensional barriers around the Devourer stronghold and found themselves in a realm where thought and reality were the same thing. The enemy collective existed as a vast web of consciousness that fed on the memories of conquered civilizations. Billions of years of stolen experiences swirled in patterns that hurt to perceive. Jack coordinated the final phase of the battle, as Alliance forces throughout the galaxy synchronized their consciousness into a single weapon. Every thinking being in the Allied fleet focused their awareness on the same target, creating a beam of pure thought that struck across dimensions at the heart of the Devourer collective. The enemy retaliated by trying to erase the entire galaxy from existence, but the memory beacons held firm. The awakened species had learned from previous defeats and built their defenses to survive even total erasure. Reality flickered, but did not break under the assault. Tony piloted his consciousness, bomb directly into the center of the Devourer collective. The explosion was not physical, but mental. a burst of pure human creativity and determination that infected the enemy's shared awareness. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers experienced concepts like hope and defiance. The collective screamed across dimensions as unfamiliar thoughts spread through their consciousness like a virus. They had consumed countless civilizations, but humanity was different somehow. Human creativity and stubborn refusal to give up created patterns that the collective could not digest or forget. Dana felt the change as Devourer attacks across the galaxy suddenly became disorganized. The collective intelligence that had coordinated them for eons was fragmenting under the assault of incompatible thoughts. Individual Devourers began operating independently, some even turning against their own kind. Jack watched as the tiers, in space, began to close. The Devourers were retreating to their home dimension, but they were taking something with them. The consciousness bomb had planted human memories in their collective awareness, and those memories would spread like seeds in dark soil. The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with transformation. The Devourers still existed, but they were no longer unified in their hunger. Human thoughts had introduced chaos into their perfect order, and that chaos would continue to grow until their collective dissolved completely. Dana stood on the rebuilt New Haven colony years later, watching children play around memorial crystals that preserved the memories of everyone who had died fighting the forgetting. The galaxy was no longer silent because the awakened species had built communication networks that could not be erased. The Devourers still lurked in dark spaces between dimensions, but they would never again find the universe defenseless. Memory. Beacons throughout the galaxy maintained records that could not be forgotten. The Alliance had taught consciousness itself how to fight back against oblivion. The eternal war between memory and forgetting continued, but the balance had shifted. For the first time in cosmic history, the forces of awareness were stronger then. The forces of erasure and the galaxy remembered how to defend itself against the hunger that waited in the void.